Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. As the lockout at BC ports drags on, small businesses sound the alarm.
And this is especially troublesome for Surrey's business community, as we have the most number of manufacturers.
The federal labor minister warns negotiations aren't moving fast enough. Plus, campers at Crab Park cleared out by the city.
They're bullying us. They're bullying people who are, it's like shooting fish in a barrel and calling it sport.
These are good operators, they're good buildings. In some cases, they're city-owned buildings.
The city says the camp is a strain on resources and good housing is available. But former residents say they have nowhere safe to go. And geoscientists investigate the conditions that caused a deadly mudslide in Coquitlam.
It must have been traveling at a very, very high velocity to do that. I'm thinking 20, 30 kilometers an hour.
And warn extreme rain events are likely to become more common.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. Thanks for joining us. It's day 4 of a lockout that shut down BC ports, impacting the flow of goods right across Canada. The federal labor minister said today negotiations are not moving fast enough and both sides are failing to act urgently. As Mira Baines reports, at the heart of the dispute is the future of automation and the potential impact on workers.
The lockout has paralyzed most shipping on the West Coast. There's still no deal between the union representing longshore and warehouse workers and the BC Maritime Employers Association. It started on Monday. Days later, there's no end in sight. Members of BC's business community gathered for a luncheon where the president and CEO of the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority addressed concerns over supply chain issues caused by the labor dispute.
Supply chain problems have become the norm, not the exception.
He also highlighted the importance of automation at the ports, a central issue between the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, which represents 700 foremen at the ports.
I'd like to see that encouraged and, in fact, accelerated if possible. Addressing the impact on employees is something that the employer needs to turn their attention to. I think they are, but that remains to be seen.
A social media post from the federal labor minister, Steve McKinnon, indicates no progress in labor talks. He said both sets of talks are progressing at an insufficient pace, indicating a concerning absence of urgency from the parties involved. The employers have said the final offer includes a 19.2% wage increase over a 4-year term, along with other improvements. Workers say the deal does not address what future staffing levels will look like with the advent of port automation. Their contract expired in March of 2023. Smaller and medium-sized businesses could feel the impact first.
This is especially troublesome for Surrey's business community, as we have the most number of manufacturers in all of BC here in Surrey, and they are huge exporters of their goods.
There is a partial closure already affecting 2 terminals at the Port of Montreal due to a separate labor dispute. Concerns are growing of how long it will take to get a deal here and then process the growing backlog. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver City staff's deadline for residents of the Crab Park encampment to move out is today. The 7 remaining designated residents cleared out their belongings and made arrangements for where they'll go next. Rafferty Baker has more on why the city says they can't stay.
Beginning this morning, city staff moved in. There were at least 24 Vancouver police officers, park rangers, and even Vancouver Fire on scene. As you can see, they established a fence perimeter around the encampment area, and they're allowing no public access, so you're getting a few advocates in there and the people helping the residents remove their stuff. Over here you can see at least a dozen advocates who have been here all day supervising, monitoring the situation, helping the residents where they can. And they say that for the residents, it's been a violating experience to essentially be forcibly removed from a place that some of them have lived for 3 years or so. It has been calm all day, and city staff say that everybody has been offered good housing.
It's a self-contained or has its own washroom, which we know is very important. And so these are good operators. They're good buildings. In some cases, they're city-owned buildings with nonprofit operators. So it's been they're thoughtful and careful offers.
One resident here says he's quite happy with the accommodation that he's been offered.
As far as hotel rooms goes, it's similar size and same amenities. Things I could have probably used here, electricity, running water, stuff that makes life a little bit easier to get up and go to work every day. But there's actually a garden right as I walk into my place, so I'm really happy about that.
This area has been for 3.5 years in its various forms a hub of a community has developed around this encampment. And some of the former residents here are on site watching everything happen, and they say in some cases they miss it. They miss being in this community and everything that it offered. Now, city staff say this area will be returned to general public use after today. People can still set up tents here at night as they can in any Vancouver park, but during the day, this will be cleared and returned to public use. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
On Vancouver Island, with the weather getting colder, a local nonprofit is hoping to reopen a warming center and shelter in Parksville, just north of Nanaimo. However, this year they're facing an unexpected opponent. As Claire Palmer reports, outreach workers say the city is blocking their plan.
Okay, so Ben's is performative. Here, Risebridge workers are preparing beds at their Nanaimo facility. They're hoping to do the same in Parksville, but are getting met with resistance from the city.
Yeah, we actually requested twice to be on a delegation because we have some major concerns about the cold weather and the lack of shelter spaces in Parksville. We put one request in and it was immediately sent back with information about bylaws.
Currently, there's no warming center or shelter in the Oceanside area. Risebridge say they have a plan and funding to reopen a shelter at Knox United Church, like they have in previous years. However, this year the city is saying no, saying zoning bylaws won't allow for it.
It's completely unnecessary when there's actual funding available to be able to create this shelter space, and the city's just not taking the responsibility serious enough. Like, these are people's family members.
The city declined an interview but issued a statement saying the city of Parksville continues to work closely with Island Health, BC Housing, and service providers to identify solutions for the Oceanside region, not just with the city of Parksville. When more information becomes available, we will communicate to the public. Meanwhile, the city's refusal to allow the shelter is attracting criticism. Moms Stop the Harm have been protesting outside of City Hall every Friday for 5 weeks, hoping the city will step up.
Not only is housing a human right federally, it is provincially, and the municipalities are responsible for doing their part to keep people housed.
I would like to see Parksville Council step up and really understand the situation, the dire need that people are in, the life and death situation. People are really struggling to survive.
In the meantime, those on the streets in Parksville will have to head to Nanaimo for shelter and warming centers. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Parksville.
Geoscientists are investigating what factors led part of a mountain to give way and knock a Coquitlam home off its foundation, killing 57-year-old teacher Sonia McIntyre. Now, as Radio-Canada's Camille Vernet reports, experts are working with municipalities to assess and map areas in danger of more landslides.
Stairs leading to nowhere. A Christmas card, a purse. Pieces of a life that was taken away. Sonia McIntyre died on October 19th. She passed away when a landslide came crashing down on her home.
Oh, this is really bad. It's you can see the path that this debris flow took down the slope. You can see they removed the structure that was knocked off its foundation and bombarded by boulders and gravel and sand.
The power of the landslide shook this natural hazard expert.
It must have been traveling at a very, very high velocity to do that. I'm thinking 20, 30 kilometers an hour. So this woman, unfortunately, had no chance.
In just one day, the region was pummeled with 200 millimeters of rain.
this is not a very safe place to live. It's at the base of a steep slope where we get heavy rainfall right along a stream course.
And with climate changing as it is, once-in-a-lifetime events are becoming less rare.
So atmospheric scientists have been kind of speculating or forecasting that we're going to see more of these extreme rainfall events, which will trigger more debris flows.
Landslides on roads and highways can also be deadly. In 2021, an atmospheric river claimed the lives of 5 people when a landslide swept away a section of Highway 99, northeast of Pemberton.
And what we're mapping here in red, the different colors of red, are the debris flow hazard zones.
In some municipalities, dangerous areas have been mapped.
If we have more frequent landsliding, then the high hazard zones will expand. It's possible, if we get larger landslides, that the low hazard zones on the edge of the fan may expand as well, reaching further out onto the floodplain.
Brett Eden works with municipalities to address these growing hazards.
We can build structures that change the flow paths of debris flows and landslides, directing them away from existing buildings. But the most important thing that we can do is to modify our development plans to ensure that we are not increasing the risk. We're not putting more people in harm's way.
The city of Coquitlam told CBC by email that the risks associated with climate change are currently being identified.
Governments they're very loath to force people out of properties. All they can do is advise property owners that this is a risky environment. And maybe the property owners don't want to hear that because it could affect their property value.
Places of beauty and tranquility, nestled by streams and rivers, and at the foot of mountains, becoming increasingly risky. Camille Vernet, Radio-Canada, Coquitlam.
Darius Madavi joins us now for a first look at the weather. Darius, what are you tracking out there?
Well, we have this rainfall warning still in place for sections of the North Coast inland around Kitimat. Worth noting that we've also seen a flood warning issued by the River Forecast Center for parts of the North Coast because flow levels have been increasing. They say that it's possible they could exceed 1 in every 20-year levels. So we wouldn't expect to see that much water rushing through those rivers except for once every 20 years, which is very unusual. Now, we also have a snowfall warning in place up in the northwest for a couple highways there, 20 to 30 centimeters expected. If we zoom out here, I just want to give you a broad picture of what's been happening, that atmospheric river feeding into the north coast. But as we head into the week ahead, we're going to be seeing more impact here on the south coast. Expect to see quite a bit of rainfall, and we'll talk about that later in the show, Michelle.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Hundreds of elementary students participated in the 8th annual Poppy Lang Remembrance ceremony, No Stone Left Alone, at the Fraser Cemetery in New Westminster.
We teach the children to read the name on the graves. It gives them a hands-on experience, that physical moment where they stand there. They will never forget it for the rest of their lives.
The No Stone Left Alone program helps students show gratitude for fallen military veterans. It also aims to instill respect for Canada's living veterans and active service members of the Canadian military around Remembrance Day.
They sacrificed their life just to have world peace. But we don't have world peace, so.
I feel really grateful that that we don't have to struggle anymore, and that lots of people died saving this country.
The No Stone Left Alone program was started in 2016 with 7 students and has now grown to 650 students, according to organizers. Still to come, closed rooms, tight security, and careful counting. The pivotal judicial recounts that will decide the outcome of British Columbia's 2024 provincial election have started, determining whether Premier David Eby's one-seat majority stands. We'll break down how it all works next.
I'm Stephen Quinn, and I love living here in Vancouver, BC. It's a city with world-renowned beauty, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. In our new daily podcast, This is Vancouver, we're exploring the diverse range of issues and stories in this city, the good, the bad, and everything in between, as told by the people who live it every day. Don't miss This is Vancouver, available wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll talk to you soon.
The judicial recount in the riding of Surrey-Guildford is underway. Although NDP incumbent Gary Begg was declared the winner, his margin of victory is only 27 votes, more than Conservative candidate Hanveer Singh Randhawa. Karen Larson has more on the judicial recount and how it works.
It's in this nondescript building in Surrey, in a nondescript but pretty large room, where the judicial recount for Surrey-Guildford started on Thursday morning. Inside, officials from Elections BC and scrutineers from both the BC NDP and BC Conservative parties are hand counting 19,090 ballots. We, of course, cannot take video or photos inside that room, but what you have essentially is a satellite courtroom with presiding BC Supreme Court Justice Kevin Liu at one end and the counters and the scrutineers at the other. If there is a contested ballot, it comes before Liu. Legal representation from both parties, the NDP and the Conservatives, make their arguments about why this ballot should or shouldn't be counted. Liu goes away, he deliberates, and then he comes back and delivers his judgment from the bench, which in this case is a small desk. Remember, the NDP won this riding by just 27 votes and hold a bare majority, 47 seat in the BC legislature. So what happens here in Surrey-Guildford could have major repercussions. A final count is expected to be announced on Friday. Karen Larson, CBC News, Surrey.
They're some of the biggest jobs in government, tackling complicated portfolios like housing, health, and finance. Premier David Eby is going to have some big decisions to pick his cabinet as the new government is formed. As Katie DeRosa reports, political watchers say Eby's cabinet picks will offer a glimpse at his key priorities.
As the public waits for the final judicial recounts to confirm the NDP's majority, Premier David Eby spent the week calling his MLAs as he drafts his cabinet. The cabinet will be sworn in on November 18th. Political pundits say Eby faces the challenge of assembling a cabinet that reflects the record number of women elected to Parliament and also ensuring representation from rural BC. Former NDP Premier Glenn Clark says it's important that Eby's ministers represent all of British Columbia.
And that will be a challenge because he doesn't have too many seats in the north.
Jeff Meggs was the former chief of staff to NDP Premier John Horgan.
He cannot turn his back on parts of the province or communities in the province that have a reasonable expectation of finding someone from their world in the front bench.
The NDP elected only 5 MLAs outside the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island, which gives Eby a small roster to pick from.
But he's got some talented new people there.
That includes Harwinder Sandhu, who was re-elected in Vernon-Lumby, Brittany Anderson, who kept her seat in Kootenay Central, and newcomers like Steve Morissette of Kootenay-Monashee, Tamara Davidson of North Coast Haida Gwaii, and Randy Neal of Powell River Sunshine Coast. Also expect the cabinet to include many rookie MLAs. Only 14 of the 27 ministers from Eby's previous cabinet are returning to government. 5 former cabinet ministers, including Education Minister Rashna Singh, Agriculture Minister Pam Alexis, and Resource Stewardship Minister Nathan Cullen, did not win their seats. 8 others, including high-profile ministers like George Heyman, who held the environment portfolio, Rob Fleming, who held the transportation portfolio, and Harry Baines, who is in charge of labor, did not run again. Eby will also be looking for a new finance minister to replace Katrina Conroy. Some have floated Jobs Minister Brenda Bailey, Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon, or Health Minister Adrian Dix as contenders for the job. Many expect high-profile ministers like Bowen Ma, Nikki Sharma, and Mike Farnworth to remain in prominent roles. The BC Conservatives and the BC Greens will swear in their caucus on November 12th. The NDP will swear in their MLAs the following day. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
This was the sunset this evening over White Rock and the pier, where it was a mix of sun and cloud today, but it's somewhere that's expecting a fair amount of rain over the next few days. So if you're in White Rock, time to get that umbrella ready to go. Darius Maravi will have the full BC-wide forecast. That's still to come.
Let's spread some joy. Kick off the holiday season with a day of special programming in support of local food banks across BC. Make the season kind. December 6th.
Vancouver police says it has seen an increase in offenses related to retail crime in recent years. Some stores have to spend thousands of dollars to step up their security measures to protect their businesses. Pinky Wong has more.
Just running out the door, grabbing stuff. You know, people are there, we're watching them, but you can't really grab them and stop them.
Joe Chaput and his staff at the cheese shop Les Amis du Fromage have experienced incidents of shoplifting and vandalism in recent years in the downtown east side. Incidents happening not only inside of the store, but also outside. Joe lost $15,000 in damages when copper piping from the roof was stolen.
You know, it could not happen for 2 or 3 months at a time, and it could be 2 in 1 week. We no longer sell things like knives or anything that can be used as a weapon. We've had somebody come in and kind of grab a handful of small knives and take them, and that's scary. I'd like to be able to sell some cheese knives. Who doesn't want a nice cheese knife with their cheese board?
Just a test.
They're now using panic buttons and hiring seasonal security guards.
Strategy is to kill people with kindness. Shoplifters hate customer service. If you're over here, they want you to go over there.
Similar incidents are also being reported in Burnaby.
We're definitely hearing from a lot of our members that they're being impacted by property crime, theft, and concerns around safety for their customers and their clients. It's particularly difficult for those at the street level. They're not always well equipped to deal with those challenging issues that are showing up on their doorsteps.
The door to this pastry shop in Metro Town was broken into.
Because it was really terrible, because small business take, lots of effort, lots of work, and then we feel like unprotected. We didn't hear anything that it was they caught them or not.
A coalition of businesses and communities across the province is asking for bail reform.
Too often we're seeing criminals or offenders being let out or back on the street with very minor bail restrictions. And these are in some cases, very serious crimes, as you've reported.
Vancouver police says in response to increasing retail theft, it launched Project Barcode about 1.5 years ago. It's a partnership between the VPD and retailers aiming to combat retail crime in the city. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
Kamloops has a lot of military history, and the museum and archives there is hosting tours to help teach people some of that legacy.
Now, our cenotaph has 189 names on it. That's our war dead, so those are soldiers who were killed in action. I think people want to remember. I think they want to remember, and there's a lot of interest in particularly the First and Second World Wars. And I think for a lot of us, we tend to sort of lose sight of the things that happened within our lifetime. These conflicts touch the lives of everyone in Kamloops. The further back you go, the more connection there is for people. They did serve at Vimy, at Passchendaele. They get battle honors for Arras and Post 70.
The world is getting more complicated. I think that it's really important for us to keep in mind that it's us, that it's people from Kamloops, it's people from BC and Canada and around the world that are participating in some of these wars that are going on nowadays, the conflicts.
November 8th is National Indigenous Veterans Day, a day to acknowledge the many contributions Indigenous soldiers played in Canada's military history. However, those contributions weren't always acknowledged. Let's take a look back at the first time BC's Indigenous veterans marched for a Remembrance Day ceremony in Vancouver in 1989.
These are the familiar sights and sounds of Remembrance Day. Canadians of many nationalities coming together to pay tribute to those who died in battle. What's different this November 11th is the group of Native people from all over BC. They want to be recognized as a distinct group that fought for Canada's freedom.
The Canadians liberated Holland. I marched in a liberation parade in Amsterdam for 13 hours.
In the past, many Natives have wanted nothing to do with Canada's Remembrance Day ceremonies because they felt betrayed. About 6,000 of them volunteered to fight in World War II, but those who returned were shunned by the Canadian government. Until 1959, under Canada's Indian Act, they had no rights. They couldn't own property, vote, get an education, or become a Canadian citizen unless they gave up their Indian status. Today, the Royal Canadian Legion acknowledged the Indians' contribution to our national freedom. A special wreath was laid in their honor.
I think this is a big statement today that they're finally being given due recognition for their part in fighting for the freedom of this country, and we're still fighting.
Vancouver MP Kim Campbell says we cannot ignore the facts. The unfair treatment of Native war veterans is a part of Canada's history.
We don't mark Remembrance Day to glorify war. We mark it to remember the human dimension of some of the things that we've gone through together as a country. And some of those dimensions are enormously inspiring, and some of them remind us that we are not a perfect society.
Today, it made me feel very proud as we marched down the street to hear all the people applauding. I felt very humble.
After today's Victory Square ceremony, Indians gathered at the Vancouver Native Centre to celebrate their participation. They say they are here to remember everyone who fought in World War II, but they also see today as the first time their contributions were truly honored. Carol Thorbs, CBC News, Vancouver.
Chiefs of police across the Greater Toronto Area say it's been a brutal year for gun violence. They say 2024 has broken records for incidents involving firearms in multiple jurisdictions. As Nicole Williams reports, it's a reflection of the steady rise in shootings in Canada over the last decade.
Melanie Ward remembers with haunting clarity the moment she learned her son was dead.
And I just dropped to my knees and screamed. It's something that will always be envisioned in my head. It was shock, it was denial, it was, how is this possible?
Alexander Kirchamaro was on his way to an appointment in Hamilton, Ontario back in March when the 19-year-old was shot and killed in broad daylight.
I lost my son. I lost the teenager. I lost the 19 years of his life, and now I lose his future.
Her family, one of many grappling with a rise in gun violence this year. Hamilton setting a new record for shootings, 58 so far, compared to 35 all of last year.
That is no secret. These are scary numbers. And what we're starting to see is a trending of daytime shootings. And not just daytime shootings, but shootouts between individuals.
Like this one, captured on dash cam in August, one person using another as a human shield. That trend extends across the Greater Toronto Area, with shootings up 40% in Toronto compared to last year, 17% in Peel region, and 80% in York region. The most recent data from Statistics Canada shows gun violence has been rising right across the country. And this expert says part of the issue stems from looser gun laws in the U.S.
The U.S. has sort of kind of opened the floodgates, and everybody else is sort of getting their crime guns from them.
The Canada Border Services Agency says smugglers are using more sophisticated methods to move guns, and agents are trying to adapt.
But experts warn that people inside Canada are also getting more desperate. And unless that changes, families are going to continue paying the price. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Toronto.
The devastation of this summer's wildfire in Jasper, Alberta was overwhelming. And equally overwhelming is the cleanup. CBC's Acton Clarkin explains.
The mammoth task of removing wildfire debris in Jasper is underway. It's one of the largest Canadian projects of its kind ever, and a complex process to get it all out. Parks Canada owns all the land in town because it's within Jasper National Park. People who've built homes here lease the land from the feds, but own the actual structures on it. Those leaseholders are the ones responsible for debris cleanup. 1/3 of structures in the town of Jasper burned in July's wildfire, including hundreds of homes. And the cleanup is expensive, estimated to be between $48 and $56 per square foot for traditional homes, and between $27 and $32 for mobile homes. That's where insurance policies come in.
Jasper is the second costliest wildfire
in Canada's history for insured damage. The insurance company is there to try to help control costs, to make sure that they're protecting the insurance policy limits, because many insurance policies have finite limits for debris removal and rebuilding.
For that work, people are allowed to use whatever contractor they want, but construction management company Ellis Dawn has been chosen by a group of insurers to lead and streamline the removal process. Ellis Dawn is working with multiple contractors to handle all the steps. No matter which company people choose, recovery officials are encouraging folks to sign up with a contractor as soon as possible.
We're all working towards this collectively, and the faster we can have all the leaseholder authorizations signed and people committed to debris removal, the faster we'll be on our way to a complete recovery.
For safety, wreckage samples from each site are sent to a lab for toxin testing. The biggest risk is asbestos.
So the safety process we do is just watering our debris down to keep the dust particles down. And then if there's any dust, we kind of just soak it a little more. We bag all of our bins that come in and out here.
Some of the material may be recycled, but most of it will end up here at the West Yellowhead Regional Landfill just outside the town of Hinton. The entire debris removal process is expected to take until spring 2025, just one element of many on the road to rebuilding Jasper. Acton Clarkin, CBC News, Jasper.
Fears grow in Canada of a potential influx of immigrants from the U.S. if Trump follows through on his promise to deport millions. That's up next. The European Climate Service issued a stark warning today. It says 2024 will be the hottest year on record. Global temperatures are on track to surpass a key threshold that 9 years ago governments pledged to avoid. Crystal Ghoussoub has the details from London.
2024 is set to be the warmest on record. The previous record year was just last year, 2023. Global scientists say, based on the data that they are looking at now, the rate of global warming has been increasing 1.62 degrees from the record set at the start of the Industrial Revolution. Now, that number, 1.62, is important because it's higher than that benchmark of 1.5 that world leaders and global scientists said was important to keep the rate of warming to. That benchmark has changed over the last little while, that it now had kind of pivoted to under 2 degrees Celsius, but they say that that is still a critical rate. And based on this new information, officials say that the concentration of greenhouse gas emissions could continue this trend.
The atmosphere, unfortunately, react to the concentration of greenhouse gases, not to our pledges or our desire. So concentration have gone up for one reason or another, and the climate system has warmed up as a consequence. So because of that, we see the record. It was bound to happen because of the warming of the climate system.
This new information is going to be talked about at COP29 when world leaders gather in Azerbaijan. Now, what, if any, changes they'll implement, we don't know. One factor that could play a role is the election of Donald Trump. The last time he was in office, he withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. If other nations will maybe start to deviate away from that agreement, we don't know. So a lot of attention is being paid to this new and disturbing trend that we're seeing and this record being set for 2024. Crystal Ghoussoub, CBC News, London.
Darius Mahdavi is back with your BC-wide forecast. Darius, what can we expect for the week ahead?
Lots of rain, Michelle, but I just want to talk quickly about this Copernicus finding or new release very quickly. You can see here, this is 2024. This is what we're expected to see over 1.5 degrees Celsius, as we heard for the first time, although 2023 did get very close. I want to emphasize the fact that even though we are now trying to keep it below 2 degrees Celsius, the difference between what we would experience with the climate changing 2 degrees Celsius versus 1.5 degrees Celsius is immense. So the goal is to keep it as close to 1.5 degrees as possible. Also, passing 1.5 degrees Celsius for 1 year does not mean we violated the Paris Climate Accords. That is a climactic average, so we have to see that for 20 years or so, maybe, being over 1.5 degrees Celsius. Also, I want to highlight just how hot the sea surface temperatures have been. This is part of what fueled all those hurricanes that rolled through the Gulf over the last month or so, but also worth noting that this is despite the fact that hurricanes usually drop colder water from underneath, so it was extraordinarily warm in the Gulf this year. Now, if we take a look here, this is the atmospheric river that's been feeding into the north coast, bringing very heavy rainfall to much of the coast. Still continuing to see that with that rainfall warning around Kitimat. Over the next few weeks, though, the next few days and maybe the next week, week and a half, we're going to see that shift to actually affecting us here on the south coast most of all. Because if we zoom out here, this high pressure system that's sitting over the Pacific is directing the jet stream right towards us here on the south coast. And if we roll this forward, we're going to see all those low pressure systems, those storm systems, directed right here to the coast. So expect to see some very heavy rainfall at times over the next week, week and a half across much of the coast. The first wave of that is going to be coming to affect the south coast most of all, but expect to continue to see quite a lot of moisture feeding in to BC. If we take a look at our precipitation map, we can see the beginnings of that as it starts to head down throughout the day on Friday, reaching us here in Vancouver, likely probably noon-ish on tomorrow, and then continuing into the Saturday. Bit of a dry break then until Sunday. We see that next big storm system come in, that one likely to bring even more rain than the one that's arriving tomorrow. So expect, again, lots of precipitation. Freezing levels are also going to be coming down, so we're going to see some snow on those peaks. With that heavy precipitation and heavy rain down here at sea level, also expect to see some heavy dumps of snow, which I'm sure is welcome news for many people who are looking forward to their winter sports. So here we go. Conditions across the province tomorrow, looking like we're going to have some sunshine in the southeast, but everywhere else we are unsettled and getting some rainfall. And here we go, Michelle. We've got that 5-day forecast that is not going to change very much for the next week and a half.
November in Vancouver.
Yeah,
thanks, Darius.
Thanks.
Donald Trump will be sworn in as U.S. president in just over 2 months. The transition period after the 2020 election was a tumultuous one, with Trump attempting to overturn the results. But today, outgoing President Joe Biden told Americans Tuesday's vote was honest, fair, and transparent. He promised a peaceful transition to power. Ellen Morrow has more from Washington.
President Joe Biden made his first public comments since Donald Trump's resounding election victory. Biden speaking earlier today at the White House there behind me. Now, in this speech, we heard the president try to console Democrats who are very upset at the scale of their loss to Donald Trump. We also heard him talk about the importance of unity as this country enters a second term for the previous president. And we also heard Biden offer his perspective on what he thinks happened in this election.
Campaigns are contests of competing visions. The country chooses one or the other. We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree. Something I hope we can do no matter who you voted for. January 20th, we'll have a peaceful transfer of power here in America.
So President Biden tried to strike an upbeat tone, but there are a lot of tough questions for Joe Biden in this moment. A lot of Democratic soul searching, even infighting. Questions like, what if Joe Biden had stepped aside as the Democratic nominee sooner? What if there was time for the Democrats to have a proper primary process instead of Joe Biden holding on and refusing to step aside until July? Lots of questions of what could have been had that not have happened. Now, in terms of the Donald Trump transition, Joe Biden talked about that as well, saying that he's spoken to Donald Trump and that he will do what he needs to do to ensure there is a smooth and peaceful transfer of power. Donald Trump did not make that call to Joe Biden back in 2020 when the roles were reversed. Now, Donald Trump has about 74 days before he takes office. There's a lot of work to be done in any transition. Thousands of government jobs are political appointments. About 1,000 of those require Senate confirmation. Now, that should be relatively easy for Donald Trump because Republicans have also won the Senate in this election. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
What policy a Trump presidency might pursue on immigration is already raising concerns in Quebec about what that impact of that immigration might be there. The CBC's Sarah Levitt has that story.
Déjà, il y a trop d'immigrants.
An emphatic message from Quebec's premier. The province has too many immigrants. Warning of a possible influx of asylum seekers to Quebec, like after Donald Trump's first win.
What I want to do is make sure that Mr. Trudeau, the federal government, take this seriously.
Between 2016 and Trump's first year in office, the number of people seeking asylum in Canada doubled from nearly 24,000 to 50,000. Many came illegally through Roxham Road on the border between New York and Quebec, thanks to a loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement between Canada and the United States. That loophole was removed and the unofficial crossing shut down last year. Since Roxham Road closed, the RCMP says more people have been smuggled into the U.S. than into Canada. But it has been preparing for a Trump win and the possibility of increased illegal crossings in this area for months.
More officers on the ground.
Sergeant Charles Poirier says there's a plan in place. The Quebec-New York border spans 110 kilometers and consists mostly of agricultural land and forests.
It's less appealing for people coming into Canada to do it illegally, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to try it.
Montreal's Welcome Collective formed to help refugee claimants who arrived after Trump's first win, many fleeing to avoid deportation. This advocate says the journey can be dangerous, even deadly, but some people are desperate enough to try.
We fear that that number will increase and pose a real danger to human lives, and we could end up with a serious humanitarian disaster on our hands.
Following Trump's last inauguration, the federal government said it welcomed refugees. But this time around, talk has focused on ensuring the security of Canada's border. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
3 people have been charged in connection with the death of One Direction singer Liam Payne. Those charged include an alleged drug dealer and a hotel worker who's accused of supplying Payne with cocaine twice during his stay in Buenos Aires. Payne died after falling from the hotel balcony. Investigators say an autopsy showed the pop star had alcohol and cocaine in his system. Have you ever seen a swarm of crows flock towards Burnaby in the evening? We visited Still Creek to find out why.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox. Save the date and join us on Friday, December 6th at CBC's Make the Season Kind in support of food banks in British Columbia. The annual charity drive is filled with special programming and festive activities. Looking forward to seeing you on December 6th. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
Every night, thousands of crows fly to an unassuming street in Burnaby at sunset to hunker down for the night.
Our Michelle Ghoussoub brings us to the roosting spot at Still Creek.
If you live in Metro Vancouver, you may have noticed thousands of crows flying overhead at sunset every night, headed to the same location, especially in the fall. Well, this is where they come.
And Still Creek is just behind us here, and the whole Still Creek corridor, which runs down that way, is the main place that pretty well all of the crows end up.
Crows have been flocking to the Still Creek roosting spot in Burnaby since the early 70s. More than 10,000 crows stay here each night, says this amateur ornithologist. He leads a bird count in the area every year.
Well, they roost together. They're a communal roosting species, and they do it for protection. They do it for communication. They're very intelligent birds. So they come right from the west side of Vancouver. They come from the North Shore, West Vancouver, the whole of the central Vancouver. They come from North Richmond and New Westminster.
So why this location? There are a few theories.
When you look at a map of the Lower Mainland, that Still Creek location is very central. If you kind of go like 25 kilometers in any direction, you've encompassed, the majority of the Lower Mainland.
Probably because it's a bit of a microclimate here. We're in the Central Valley Greenway of Burnaby, and it's a little lower. And today's a good example. It's a bit more out of the wind and less exposed.
After a sound sleep, the crows leave the roosting spot at dawn in extended family groups, heading back to their regular foraging areas across the Lower Mainland, and do it all again the next evening. Michelle Ghoussoub, CBC News, Burnaby.
Darius, that could be a fun thing for you to check out tonight.
Like flying to Burnaby and back?
Yeah.
Oh, fun. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We'll have your next local news at 11, right after the national. Good night.